Good afternoon and good evening to some of you, and good morning also. I'm Julian Griselia from Netafim UK, and we are pleased to welcome you to this webinar on irrigation solutions for container grown plants. For those of you that haven't joined us before on a webinar, you'll see on your right hand side a chat panel. In here you can type any queries or questions, and we'll endeavour to answer them at the end of the presentation. If we don't manage to get to them, we will respond directly after the presentation and answer them for you. Also, at the end of the presentation, we'll talk about a free gift that we have for you for taking the time to attend this afternoon. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our two speakers, Jenny Atherton and Tom Reinhorn from our agricultural and horticultural team. Over to you, Jenny.
Thank you, Julian. I'd like to start by welcoming everybody once again. Thank you for joining us today. Myself and my colleague, Tom Reinhorn, will be discussing container growing solutions with you. Firstly, we'll be looking at Netafim and who we are, the drip concept, moving on to how it works in more detail, and then we'll take a look at the history and evolution of drippers before we discuss Netafim's revolutionary new product, finishing with a Q&A. If you do have any questions, as Julian said, as we go along, please write these in the chat so that they can be addressed. Now, before we introduce ourselves in more detail, we'd like to learn a little bit about our audience today. So I'd be grateful if you could complete this short poll, and we can discuss the results a little later during the webinar. The poll will remain open for a short while, but we'll continue with the webinar. So let's carry on. Okay, so while we're learning about our participants today via the poll, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My name's Jenny Atherton, and I'm Netafim UK's account manager for agriculture and horticulture, providing technical and commercial support to our customers, a role which I've been enjoying since 2018. Although I've been with Netafim for a little over 6 years now, I've worked in various departments within the company. And a little lesser known fact about me is that I am a qualified forklift truck driver. So let's move on. Let me introduce you to Netafim. Some of you may already be familiar with Netafim, but for those who aren't, we'll begin by looking at who Netafim are. The Netafim story starts in 1965 when an agricultural community were trying to grow crops in the Negev desert in Israel. Having to adapt to the difficult growing conditions, they began to develop the concept of drip irrigation, and so began Netafim. Now, some 56 years later, we continue to share our knowledge of precision irrigation with the world, helping farmers grow more with less by irrigating directly to the plant's root zone. But did you know that 50% of the world's irrigation is still flood and furrow? And for those of you that haven't seen the flood and furrow method, it's when the fields are flooded, for example, paddy fields, and then they're drained. I'm sure you can appreciate this is not an efficient method. With drip, we irrigate right to the root zone where the plant needs the water with zero water wastage. Compared to flood and furrow, drip gives higher yields, and in some cases, as much as 100% increase has been achieved. Reduced costs have also been seen in labour, fertilisers, and crop protection, and consequently reducing the carbon footprint of food production. As a result of Netafim's drip concept, we did what would seem the impossible and made the desert bloom, enabling agriculture where it wasn't doable before. Here you can see an aerial shot of Kibbutz Hatzarim in the Negev desert in Israel, where Netafim began. But in those 56 years of Netafim, we haven't sat on our laurels. We've been developing the concept to make it more efficient, accurate, and resistant to blockage. Here you can see a timeline of some of the significant developments in that journey so far, but it doesn't stop here. We're still developing every day. Globally, we're driving the mass adoption of smart irrigation, helping the world grow more with less. We're now the largest drip manufacturer in the world, present in 110 countries. We have 33 subsidiaries with 17 manufacturing plants and over 5,000 employees. But Israel is still the place where we conduct the vast majority of our research and development and where we manufacture our core technology. We joined the Orbia Group in 2017, and this is fortifying our existing global presence and helping us enter new markets. Orbia is a community of companies bound by a shared purpose, consisting of 5 business groups, including Warvin, Duraline, Vestalit, Cora, and of course, Netafim. Today, Orbia operates in 41 countries with 137 production plants, 18 research and development facilities, and has commercial activities in more than 100 countries with over 22,000 employees and an annual consolidated revenue of $5.8 billion. Based in the Northwest, Netafim UK is established as a market leader in providing innovative irrigation solutions for agricultural, sports and landscape applications throughout the UK and Ireland. Netafim UK supplies a complete portfolio of equipment to state-of-the-art irrigation systems via a national network of highly trained irrigation design and supply companies. We support these with our local sales, technical and agronomical experts who in turn are supported by Netafim's global network of expertise. We are the only drip irrigation manufacturer directly represented in the UK. Julian, do we have the results of the poll, please?
Yes, we do. 20% of the attendees are fruit growers, 12% are ornamental growers, 40% are horticultural irrigation dealers, 15% are landscape irrigation dealers, 7% are consultants, and 6% class themselves as others.
Okay, we've got a nice distribution then. I think we're talking to the right audience, and you should all find this very interesting. Okay, so let's look at what we've discussed so far. We've talked about Netafim, who we are, a brief history of Netafim and our footprint in the UK. We talked about Netafim's vision to grow more with less. We've looked at the evolution of some of Netafim's products. I've told you a bit about me, we've learned a little bit about you, and now it's time to hand over to Tom, who will introduce himself and guide us through some of Netafim's solutions. Over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Jenny. Okay, so before we go into the world of drip irrigation, I'll talk a bit about myself to introduce myself. So my name is Tom, and I moved here from Israel in 2019. Back home, I worked as a farm manager, growing things from vineyards to open field crops such as wheat, chickpeas, melons, and a lot more. And all my life I've been within irrigation and that field, mainly with Netafim products. So before we talk about container irrigation, let's talk a bit about drippers and how they work to help us more. So as you can see, Netafim drippers are divided into 2 types. The first one is the non-compensating dripper, and the second is the pressure compensating dripper, or the PC dripper in short. We'll go over the types in a minute to understand more about them. Firstly, we have to understand that all drippers work based on the same principles. But what are those principles exactly? Well, in the heart of the drippers is the labyrinth, as you can see here in the slide. The labyrinth is the zigzag pattern, as you can see, and its job is to take water at a certain pressure and to slow it down to make it drip. This is really the most important part of the dripper, and the area that we in Netafim spend the most significant resources on developing. A non-compensating dripper only has this labyrinth, and this means that the flow out of the dripper is directly affected by the water pressure on the dripper. But what does that mean? Well, I might get 1 liter an hour at 1 bar of pressure, but if I put 2 bars of pressure, I might get 1.5 liters an hour. That's how simple it is. So with a non-compensated irrigation system, the design and planning is critical to ensure the pressure is uniform across the entire system, and therefore the output in the system is uniform. When we have big changes like topography and row length, it's not always possible to use these types of drippers. For that, we have a solution, which is the pressure compensating dripper. The pressure compensating dripper, or the PC drippers, are designed to discharge water at a uniform flow rate under a wide range of pressures. So the same amount of water will be released at that range of pressures. So like I said before, with a non-compensated dripper, where the water pressure will tell us how much water comes out, here the dripper will tell us. So if we have 1 bar of pressure or 3 bars of pressure, the amount of water coming out of the dripper will be the same. Now, how does this PC dripper works? Well, I'll put on a short video just to show us in a nicer way how it works. So here we can see the drippers under the rows in our field, and we can see how with the non-PC drippers, the flow is not uniform due to pressure differences in places along the row. And it could be caused by changes in topography and the long rows in our field. And that can cause over and under irrigation spots within our field and could cause the waste of water, fertilizers, and a lot of energy. To overcome these problems, we came up with the pressure compensated dripper, or the PC dripper. The PC dripper has a silicon diaphragm that reacts to the pressure and therefore creates counter resistance to the flow of water. It also has a self-flushing mechanism, and that's to prevent clogging and to ensure the long-term performance that will last for a long time, for years. So the PC drippers will make sure that we have a perfect uniformity in our field. We'll actually reduce the system cost due to less submains and long laterals. Okay. So like we've seen in the video, on this slide, you can see these 2 drippers, the online and the integral drippers, and they both work in the same way. We've got the heart of the dripper, which is the labyrinth, which slows down the water like we talked about before. But unlike the non-compensated dripper, this pressure compensated dripper has the diaphragm that can regulate the flow rate depending on the water pressure. Now, all this is to make sure that we have the uniform flow rate in our system. We have different types of PC drippers, all to help us with our work in the field. We have basic PC drippers that we can see here, and those are usually used in orchards and open field. We have anti-siphon drippers that are used in subsurface irrigation, such as gardens. And we have CNL drippers, and that's to allow us to use pulse irrigation and typically used in greenhouses and substrate growers. And I will talk about these a bit later. These drippers have a big portfolio of flow rates from 0.5 litre to 12 litres an hour. So we talked about the 2 types of drippers in the Netafim, but within them we have 2 ways to use them. First, we have the integral drippers that people often use in open field crops. These drip lines are made with drippers welded inside the pipes. And then the second one is the online drippers that we usually use in glass houses and container irrigation, which is the main reason we're here today. The online drippers are punched into the LDP pipe either by hand, or we can actually assemble them with robots in our factory in the Netherlands. Again, both integral and online drippers work based on the same principle. With integral drippers, we have a big portfolio as well. We can cover everything a grower actually needs and wants. Every drip line has a wall thickness that determines the life of the drip and how we want to use it, from thin wall to heavy wall. In the integral drippers, the dripper is welded inside the pipe, and therefore we could actually use them in different spaces for the need of the grower. And we can use these integral drippers as well in container irrigation, and I'll show later on how to do that. When talking about online drippers, we're actually talking about the way we want to distribute the water into our container and pots after the dripper. And that every system we can decide to use it as a PC system or as a non-compensating system, using only the labyrinth to regulate the water flow. So what we see here are some of the drippers and methods to distribute the water with online drippers. You might see some that you're actually familiar with and working with them in your farm. And we'll talk about the ways to use them right now. Okay, so here we have the spider and the stakes system to distribute the water into our pots. We could choose to have 1 or 2 or even more stakes in each pot, with or without the dripper. Each stake, as you can see here in this slide, has a labyrinth and can be used as a non-pressure compensating dripper, but we can actually choose to use a pressure compensated dripper, and that's to ensure the uniform flow rate through the stake and the spiders in the whole system. And we'll talk about the ways to use these stakes and how we want to use them later on in the presentation. The idea of using these stakes is to direct the water to the place that we want to use, that we want to irrigate in our pot exactly. In some cases, the pots can be too big to effectively use stakes, typically when the pots are over 40 litres or even larger. So for these situations, we have the spray stake. These are in effect a small sprinkler fitted to a dripper to control the flow rate, meaning the water is spread over a wider area. These are all designed with nursery growers in mind, and the stake is designed. The stake has a plug, so if you want to remove one pot, you can simply plug the individual stake, and that's it. The flow rates for these go from 12 litres an hour to 40 litres an hour. We also can use these types of drippers, which are the high flow rate drippers from 20 to 40 litres an hour. And as you can see on the picture, we can apply caps to stop the dirt and insects going in and blocking them. We call these types bubblers. Okay, so what did we talk about in the last few slides? First, we talked about what is a dripper and how they actually work. We talked about the heart of the dripper, which is that labyrinth that we were talking about, that slows the water, and how that creates our non-pressure compensating dripper. Then we move to the pressure compensated dripper that has the diaphragm that regulates the amount of water we actually use. And then moving on to the different methods to distribute that water in our containers and pots, using stakes, spray stakes, bubblers, and then spiders. Now, all these systems work really well for different needs in our farm, but we do have problems that can happen while using them. And Jenny will discuss these problems and how to fix them right now. Jenny?
Thank you, Tom. So let's have a look at the challenges that container growing can present. As Tom explained earlier, here we can see container irrigation where we have Uniram fitted with a 4-way spider. In this example, we can see one dripper with all 4 leads and stakes allocated to the one pot. And what we can see is that all 4 stakes are quite clustered, and due to the positioning, approximately 60% of this pot has no drip at all. And in this image, we have an example of a PCJ with a 2-way spider, again, as Tom mentioned earlier, with one dripper that's been allocated to 2 different pots. Typical issues that growers can suffer is managing the positioning of the drip points. We can see the white deposits in the picture, which are salts building up at the edge of the wetted area. These salt buildups mean that the plant can't utilise the entire pot volume. So to overcome this, we can increase the number of stakes per pot, but by increasing the number of stakes, obviously we increase the cost of the system. Also, a certain level of skill is required during installation. It is possible for the stakes to be inserted too deep into the pot. This can be particularly problematic for a crop such as blueberries, which have a shallow root system and a very open media. Furthermore, installation can be labour intensive and time consuming if containers are to be moved around. However, we've got a solution for this, and Tom will explain more.
Thank you, Jenny. Yes, so Jenny just talked about all the issues that we have using the different methods. So one way to overcome these different issues in our pots and containered crops, we've got the NetBow. The NetBow is a patented dripper that Netafim has developed exclusively for these container irrigations. Now, what is so unique about this NetBow when we talk about water distribution? So the design of NetBow allows us to distribute the water directly onto the soil and in even spaces. Because we have outlets in even spaces from each other, that allows us not to have any blind spots, as you can see here in this on this slide. And therefore, because we don't have any blind spots and the water is spread out in a uniform way, the roots can utilize the whole pot and grow in a healthy way. Here, we can see a cut of a pot irrigated with NetBow and without NetBow. You can see that the water on the right is a lot more uniform than the one on the left. We have to remember, it doesn't mean that the other products don't work right now and are irrelevant. It just shows that for certain crops, NetBow could be a better solution for irrigation for you. As we're talking about uniformity and water distribution in our pots and containers, all that can prevent the buildup of salts, like Jenny was talking about before, and the dense root zones, and that can help us reach a better plant and a better growth for it. And when there's a uniform distribution of water, the plant can grow to their full growth potential. And as a result of that, the root system is a lot more healthier, and therefore that will help us to prevent root disease and soil problems. You need to remember that a healthy plant and crop has a healthy root system. The other thing that we have with using NetBow, we have a high clogging resistance. The outlets of the NetBow are designed with a dripper within them. So on this NetBow, we have 8 outlets. Each one has its own dripper within them, that heart of the dripper, the labyrinth. The labyrinth within them actually helps to regulate the flow rate out of them and helps with the clogging resistance within the NetBow. Okay, so we can use the NetBow with PC drippers, but we do recommend using them with CNL drippers, and that's to ensure the system's uniformity with our crop. The CNL drippers means that the water does not drain out of the system, therefore allows us to use pulse irrigation, as the system does not have to fill itself up every time, meaning the whole system starts and finishes at the same time with no lags or delays. So we talked about the mechanism of NetBow, but how do we actually place it in our glass house and pots? Well, it's very easy to install. The NetBow comes with leads and the dripper itself. So all we have to do is connect the dripper to the pipe and then to the NetBow. After that, we've just placed the NetBow on the soil, as you can see here in the picture, and that's it. That's how simple it is. The other main thing that we have with NetBow are the spikes that you can see on the picture, and that's to ensure the stability of the NetBow. The NetBow system is very versatile, and not only for growing operations, but can be used on landscape applications to irrigate pots and tubs in residential settings. So what did we talk about until here? The last few slides. We talked about the water distribution and the uniformity in the NetBow. Talked about how each outlet has its own labyrinth, so it's very high, it has very high clogging resistance. Then we talked how easy it is to install it. It's very user friendly. And we have some exciting news about the NetBow, and Jenny will tell you all about it.
Thank you, Tom. Yes, the NetBow family is growing. In addition to the NetBow 250mm unit that we've shown you already, that's typically used with pots of around 20 litres, we're adding a NetBow 120mm unit for pots of around 7.5 to 10 litres in size to the family. This has all the same benefits of its bigger brother, but has 4 drip points. In addition, we've been developing an option to have removable or foldable spikes on the NetBow lock. Julian, it looks like we are approaching the end of the webinar. Do we have any questions?
We have a few. While you're on, Jenny, when will the smaller units be available in the UK?
That's a good question. We expect to see them in the UK in August.
Okay. And how much does NetBow cost?
I mentioned earlier in the presentation that we distribute through a network of dealers. They'll be happy to supply you with a quotation based on your requirement. If you don't have a dealer, if you just drop me a mail or give me a call, you can see my details on the screen there. I can put you in contact with one. But I think you'll find that NetBow represents excellent value for money.
Okay, thank you. Tom, a couple of questions for you. Can the diaphragm and the drippers be damaged by chemicals in the water?
Well, it's a really good question, Julian. But the diaphragms in the dripper are made in a very special way to actually prevent all that from happening. So, no, they won't be damaged from using chemicals in the water, because they're used in a way so we could actually use them in agriculture. So, no, they're made in a special way, so they won't be damaged.
Okay. Another question. Can I use NetBow around trees and shrubs that I have planted in my garden?
Yes, you can. The only thing that you need to make sure when you use NetBow around trees and shrubs is maybe using a low flow dripper. So instead of using 8 litres an hour, I'd probably use 2 or 4 litres an hour drippers, just to ensure that the water won't drain through the soil, to make it closer to the roots.
Okay. Another question from a nursery grower. We take some of our pots out as we sell them. Can I block the NetBow off?
Yes, well, you can block the NetBow, but you're not blocking actually the NetBow. You're blocking the dripper connected to the NetBow. So yeah, we can supply some caps that you just put on the dripper and block it that way.
Okay. And what flow rate can you use through the NetBow?
Well, we use between 2 and 8 litres an hour for the NetBow. So there are different drippers you could use, depending on actually what you need and the size of the NetBow. Now we have 2 different types of NetBow, so depending on that, you can decide. Okay,
so we use a different hub dripper depending on the flow rate
that
we want to.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. That's cool. Another question I've got: 4-way spiders at the moment, like the ones you used in your presentation. Can I use the same dripper with a NetBow?
Yes, you can. The idea of the NetBow is to change the way we distribute the water, so the drippers are the same in when we talk about that. So yeah, the answer is yes.
Okay. And one final question. I think you covered it, but perhaps recap is the how do you prevent root intrusion with the NetBow? Having the drip line close to the soil.
Well, how do you prevent root intrusion? Because the drippers are not in the soil, are not connect. The dripper is outside of the soil, so roots won't go in. The drippers are not inside the soil.
So
That's the question.
The NetBow actually creates like an air gap, does it, between the NetBow and between the drip
Yeah,
line and the soil?
the dripper is inside the NetBow, so it doesn't touch the soil itself, so roots do not go in there.
Okay,
that's
great.
Question, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay,
and I think that answers all the questions, and we're about to the end of our allotted time. So I mentioned at the beginning a free gift. We have available some NetBow trial packs that include the drippers, includes a NetBow 250 with a detachable feet, and includes a selection of leads, so you can actually try it in your own environment. If you'd like to email Jenny or Tom, we'll be happy to send you one of those free of charge. If you'd like any more information on the NetBow, of course, you can contact Jenny or Tom again, or contact your local Netafim dealer, or you can look at the website www.netafimuk.com, and you'll find a lot more information on there. So thank you for taking the time to join us today. Thank you to Jenny and Tom for your presentation, and look out for more webinars from Netafim UK in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.